Picture yourself beneath a sky so vast and unbroken, it seems to stretch beyond the limits of imagination. Above you, countless stars shimmer in the dry Nevada air, brighter here than in most places on Earth. The desert at night offers a clarity that cities cannot, a purity of silence, an expanse of space so large it feels both comforting and unnerving. The atmosphere is crisp, the kind of air that makes each breath taste sharp and alive. Against that endless canvas, there is an impression you are standing at the edge of something profound, something hidden, just beyond reach. The stillness itself begins the tale. Nothing interrupts it, but the occasional whisper of wind brushing against sagebrush, or the distant song of an unseen coyote echoing over rocky ridges, carrying with it the feeling that secrets are nearby. The Nevada desert is not an ordinary landscape. It is a theater of extremes, where scorching daylight transforms into icy darkness with startling speed. By nightfall, the sand, rocks, and mountains radiate a slow release of the sun's memory, glowing faintly under the pale wash of moonlight. Even shadows appear different here, elongated, distorted, sometimes still, other times flickering with the rhythm of the shifting wind. Listeners might imagine standing in those shadows, surrounded by quiet vastness, the hum of existence reduced to a near nothing. And yet, while calm abounds, there hangs the suggestion that not all is empty. The desert seems too silent, too carefully arranged, almost as if listening back. On the far horizons, silhouettes of rugged mountains mark the edges of vision. Some appear jagged like the teeth of stone giants. Others roll softly into the distance, as though reclining beneath a blanket of starlight. There is a kind of paradox here. On one hand, the land appears untouched and eternal, the same as it has always been, desolate, yet serene. On the other hand, one cannot ignore the subtle presence of humanity, faint yet undeniable. In the distance, through stretches of nothingness, there exists the glow of guarded facilities. Beyond faded signs warning intruders to turn back, beyond barbed wire and patrols, lies the legendary secrecy of the Nevada Test and Training Range, an expanse home to mysteries that many believe extend far beyond military exercises. In this environment, you do not simply see stars, you feel them. The cosmos hangs so vividly above that sleeping under it tempts one toward visions of infinity. Constellations appear as ancient legends drawn onto an invisible dome, their meanings whispering through cultures across time. Orion leans on his belt of diamonds. Cassiopeia reclines in her celestial throne. Between them, rivers of pale light stream across blackness, forming the Milky Way like a pathway suggested but never traveled. If you allow yourself to gaze upward long enough, perspective shifts. The world you stand upon suddenly appears small, fragile, and fleeting. The desert, however grand, becomes a slight sliver of dust beneath galaxies reaching forever. To look at this sky is to confront both humbling insignificance and stirring possibility. Yet among these natural marvels lies an unavoidable counterpoint. While stars symbolize permanence, the desert also carries an aura of secrecy designed by humans. In shadowed valleys and hidden airstrips, unusual activities have been rumored for decades. Witnesses have spoken of lights that defy explanation, moving suddenly, darting without sound, glowing intensely before blinking into nothing. Some dismiss such accounts as flares, weather balloons, or experimental aircraft. Others interpret them differently, suggesting visitors from worlds beyond. And so the desert becomes more than geography. It becomes a canvas where earthly certainty meets cosmic uncertainty. The greatest contrast of all unfolds here each night, the familiarity of nature against the suspicion that something wholly unfamiliar lingers close. As you take in this environment, every sense heightens. The ground beneath your feet feels fragile, crunching lightly with sand and gravel. Cold seeps from the earth, yet the air remains dry, still capable of holding warmth against your skin. The scent of creosote bushes drifts faintly, that earthy fragrance the desert always carries after dusk. Every sound magnifies. One pebble shifted by your step resonates. One gust of wind carries miles. If a person stood nearby, even their quiet breath might feel amplified within the vast soundscape. This is the mood the desert imposes. Isolation blended with intimacy, requiring both respect and surrender. There is reason this desert has become central to so many mysteries. Its sheer emptiness provides secrecy. Its vastness ensures space where activities might unfold unseen. Add to this the reality that certain regions remain closed, their entrances bound by guards, and the aura of curiosity intensifies. Fences appear ordinary at first glance, but they represent invisible boundaries, thresholds between mundane earth and forbidden territory. For most, crossing these lines is unthinkable. The desert enforces this boundary not only through human authority, but through nature itself. Distance, remoteness, and a quiet that reminds travelers how small and unprepared they truly are. The silence here is not lifeless, though. It pulses with suspense. You may find yourself listening intently, almost expecting something, anything, to break the stillness. And when the occasional streak of light crosses the sky, the question emerges naturally. Is it merely a satellite? Another mundane flicker in humanity's growing web above? Or is it something more? Skeptical voices insist on simple explanations. Believing voices allow for wonder. Somewhere between the two perspectives, imagination thrives. This contrast between rational closure and open-ended possibility is what ensures the desert's night never feels entirely at rest. Each step deeper into this scene becomes a step further into mystery. Even if nothing appears unusual, anticipation builds, sustained by the reputation of what lies beyond view. For many, Area 51 is not only a classified testing ground, but a symbol of concealment, a metaphor for what humanity is not yet allowed to see. To stand outside its boundaries under endless stars is to feel like a child lingering outside a locked library. The walls suggest knowledge. The fences suggest hidden revelations. The night sky suggests that whatever secrets exist, they belong not only to governments, but to the universe itself. As hours roll on, the rhythm of the desert lulls perception. Time itself slows. Seconds stretch across miles of silence. Eyes adjust to starlight and moonlight, revealing subtleties invisible before. The slight sheen on stone, the shimmer of distant heat still radiating upward, the faint trace of wind trailing over open ground. In those moments, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The desert landscape ceases to be background. It becomes a participant in the unfolding story, a stage where mystery might step quietly into view at any moment, without warning or announcement. That possibility alone keeps listeners awake, watchful, yet soothed. So here we settle, at the meeting place of certainty and speculation. The Nevada desert at night calms with its stillness, even as it unsettles with its potential. It offers a perfect stage for secrets, whispered just beyond hearing. Imagine yourself resting here now, lying back on a blanket, gazing into galaxies above, feeling the cool earth cradling you from below. On the horizon, the faint glow of a restricted compound flickers dimly, a human-made ember amid natural vastness. Perhaps it means nothing more than routine procedures. Or perhaps it means everything we suspect. In this timeless quiet, under these timeless stars, only one truth remains fully visible. The night sky is immense enough to hold both your dreams and the unanswered questions of the ages. In the stillness of the Nevada desert, the story begins to take on human form. For decades, people have wondered about the figure at the heart of some of the most extraordinary claims ever made about extraterrestrial technology and government secrecy. His name, simple and unassuming, became whispered in living rooms, debated in late-night radio shows, and repeated in documentaries across the world. Bob Lazar. At first mention, there is nothing dramatic in those two syllables. In fact, that ordinariness is part of the intrigue. Lazar did not appear to be the sort of man destined to ignite global debate. To most who saw him, he looked like a quiet neighbor, someone more likely to fix a motorbike in his driveway than to open up about alien spacecraft hidden in top-secret facilities. Yet in 1989, when he appeared publicly to reveal what he claimed to have witnessed while working at a military installation near Area 51, the world of UFO lore changed forever. Bob Lazar was not introduced on a stage or at a convention, but came into focus through investigative journalism. A Las Vegas news reporter named George Knapp first presented Lazar's story to the public on local television. Lazar appeared initially in shadow, his face obscured, his voice slightly altered, using the pseudonym Dennis. The image conveyed secrecy, fear, and gravity. Only later did he reveal his true name and identity. The very first hook was set. Here was a man claiming to have direct experience with reverse engineering alien spacecraft in a facility so secretive that even most government officials would deny its existence. And in that moment, the tone shifted. It was no longer hearsay about unusual lights in the sky. It was a first-person account from someone claiming to have worked inside the machinery of the unknown. The man himself, however, was not an obvious prophet of mysteries. Bob Lazar looked like anyone else from suburban America in the late 80s. Medium build, glasses, unassuming demeanor. He could have stepped from a college classroom or a local auto body shop. He projected calm, not zealotry, matter-of-fact delivery instead of flamboyance. He never tried to sell his story with dramatic flair. That plainness was paradoxically one of his strongest hooks. If he were fabricating a tale, why would he package it in such understated tones? Yet that very ordinariness also opened him to skepticism. He did not resemble the stereotypical scientist of media imagination, nor the conspiracy theorist shouting in all caps. He straddled a line between plausible insider and questionable storyteller, leaving his audience both intrigued and uncertain. To understand why his revelations shook so many, one must know a little of his background. Lazar described himself as a physicist and engineer, someone drawn to advanced technology from an early age. He made news in the mid-1980s, long before claiming alien connections, by attaching a jet engine to his Honda car, a stunt that turned heads in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where he was then living. The story of the jet car was portrayed in a local newspaper, along with reference to his work at Los Alamos National Laboratory. This mixture of eccentric ingenuity and affiliation with scientific institutions bolstered his image when his later claims emerged. Here was a tinkerer and innovator, someone who clearly had technical competence, someone believable as an engineer brought into a secret project. So when he went public with the claim that he had worked at a site known as S4, near the infamous Area 51, his words carried a strange gravity. According to Lazar, this facility housed multiple extraterrestrial craft recovered by the United States government. His role, as he described it, was to assist in reverse engineering their propulsion systems. Imagine the audacity of that claim. Not only had he allegedly seen alien craft firsthand, but he was employed to study the very technology that made them fly. His descriptions were delivered without tremor, spoken with the same cadence as one might use to describe the mechanics of a car engine. That tone, calm, clear, deliberate, astonished audiences. He was not trying to frighten or thrill. He simply explained, as if stating facts. Whether one believed him or not, the delivery gave pause. Lazar's key technical disclosure was the propulsion system he studied. He spoke of a reactor powered by a then unknown element on the periodic table, which he identified as element 115. This element, he said, created a gravitational field that could bend space-time itself, allowing the craft to travel enormous cosmic distances in ways that appeared impossible to human physics. At the time, element 115 had not yet been synthesized in laboratories, and so the claim sounded like pure science fiction. Decades later, scientists did indeed create a short-lived version of this element, though not stable in the way Lazar described. To some, this lent partial credence, a hint that perhaps his assertions were not entirely fantasy. To others, it was merely coincidence, not proof. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Maybe, just maybe, Lazar had seen something real. What made Lazar fascinating was not only the technical content, but also his posture toward it. He did not plead with audiences to believe. He openly stated that much of his experience frightened him, that his personal life was upended by the revelations. Yet he spoke of it with resignation rather than hysteria. He insisted that secrecy weighed on him. He felt the public should know what their government was hiding. And so, despite his fears, he went on record. It was not only the content of his claims, but the courage, or recklessness, or desperation, depending on one's interpretation, that gave them staying power. He was not someone who appeared eager for fame or fortune. Instead, he resembled a man reluctantly stepping forward because silence weighed even heavier. The emergence of Bob Lazar in 1989 marked a turning point in UFO culture. Before him, stories of unidentified lights or abductions dominated the lore. With him, the narrative shifted to government complicity, to the possibility of advanced technology hidden away. He connected the fantastical to the bureaucratic. He gave skeptics a target and believers a hero. He created a bridge between fringe lore and mainstream curiosity. His name quickly became entangled in late-night talk shows, magazine articles, and documentaries. Friends reported the disruption his fame caused. Strangers looked at him with curiosity, tinged by suspicion. Yet through it all, he maintained the same understated demeanor, giving interviews in his plain voice, never embellishing with theatricality. This consistency, whether a mark of integrity or simply practiced delivery, became the hallmark of his persona. Of course, controversy shadowed him immediately. Investigators attempting to verify his background struggled. Records allegedly detailing his attendance at prestigious schools like MIT and Caltech could not be found. Employment records at Los Alamos were contested, though anecdotal evidence suggested he had connections there. Each missing record opened him to critiques. Was he truly the insider he claimed? Or was his expertise exaggerated? Believers countered that erasure of records was precisely what one would expect from a government attempting to silence a whistleblower. And so, the divide widened. For every skeptic who pointed to inconsistencies and missing proof, there was a believer who pointed to the very same gaps as evidence of a cover-up. Bob Lazar embodied that paradox perfectly. Everything about him seemed both plausible and implausible at once. What cannot be denied is the endurance of his story. More than 30 years later, Bob Lazar's name still circulates alongside discussions of Area 51 and alien technology. He remains a central figure, even to those who doubt him, because his testimony defined the shape of modern UFO folklore. He represents the collision of ordinary life with extraordinary claims, the man in glasses who looked like a teacher but spoke of gravity-bending propulsion. He is both grounding and destabilizing, both familiar and fantastic. And it is this duality, ordinary on the surface, extraordinary in claim, that explains why his narrative lingers. He was not a man dressed as a prophet, nor someone ranting from the fringes. He was, and remains, the everyman witness of the impossible. As you imagine him, picture not only the words he spoke, but the way in which he sat while speaking. Calm posture, steady demeanor, explaining alien reactors as casually as one might discuss household wiring. Then picture the world around him, interviewers leaning forward, audiences listening breathlessly, governments nervously uncomfortable. His presence created a ripple that still flows outward decades later. He did not scream of doom. He simply said, "I was there. I saw this. This is what I believe to be true. You can judge." That attitude, tranquil yet defiant, defined the mystery. Whether he lied or told the truth is debated endlessly, but his impact cannot be erased. Tonight, in the desert where his story began, the name floats again. Who is Bob Lazar? He is either a man who revealed one of the greatest secrets in history, or a man who convinced the world to consider it. In either case, he remains a character unlike any other, the quiet neighbor who claimed to have glimpsed the universe itself from behind military fences. And as his story folds into this night's telling, the desert air grows heavier with curiosity. It is here, in the stillness under stars, that his persona is most vivid, existing somewhere between truth and illusion, raising the same irresistible question whispered in living rooms since 1989. What if he was right? Imagine for a moment that you are stepping past barbed wire fences and checkpoint gates, moving into the restricted terrain of Groom Lake and the areas hidden far beyond. Bob Lazar said that just south of the familiar outline of Area 51, there exists another installation, secretive and tucked away into natural hills. This facility, he insisted, was known to him as S4. Unlike only hearing rumors of UFOs flying above the desert, here at S4, he claimed to have walked among the evidence, touched it with his hands, and peered at the impossible with his own eyes. His account bends the imagination. 9 craft not of earthly origin, hidden in hangars, carved discreetly into the mountainside, their curved shapes blending almost seamlessly with the desert ridges. Within this setting of isolation, Lazar alleged he was invited to study the very technology of these craft, to sit in front of propulsion systems no human civilization had yet understood, and to determine how they functioned. The claim alone is staggering. It elevates the UFO discussion from lights in the night sky to hardware resting on the Nevada desert floor. Lazar's description of the craft themselves struck listeners as oddly practical. They, ear not glittering spaceships from stylized films. Instead, he described them as relatively simple saucer-shaped discs, metallic in appearance, with dimensions that implied compact operation rather than grand spectacle. One detail startled many: the size. According to Lazar, the interior did not match human scale. The equipment, consoles, and seating seemed built for beings much smaller than an average adult. The ceilings were low, chairs diminutive, and layouts alien, not only in origin, but in ergonomics. His account suggested these craft were not designed for us. Standing amid them, he claimed, felt like intruding on tools meant for someone entirely different. Yet the heart of his story lay not in their shape, but in what powered them. As Lazar explained, each craft housed a reactor unlike anything found in conventional engineering. At the center was the mysterious element 115, an exotic material unknown to science at the time. Lazar reported that small quantities of this element fueled a reactor capable of producing an immense gravitational field. To make such an idea digestible, he drew comparisons to magnets pulling at one another across invisible space. But rather than magnetic lines, the reactor manipulated gravity itself. By amplifying and shaping these gravitational waves, the craft could bend the fabric of space-time, allowing travel without conventional propulsion. To an outsider, this was staggering. While rockets require massive fuel and engines, while jets thunder with combustion, here was a silent system that simply distorted the stage upon which motion occurs. Instead of moving through space, the craft allegedly made space itself move. He explained that by creating a waveguide of controlled gravity, the craft could pull itself along like a surfer riding an invisible tide. And because the craft would bend the local geometry of space, distance itself became elastic. From within the bubble of warped gravity, thousands of miles might collapse into a short step. Suddenly, journeys between stars could be shortened from centuries to hours. For the layperson, the scientific terms blurred into mystery, yet Lazar's calm recounting was digestible. He likened the propulsion system to placing a bowling ball on a mattress. As the mattress bent, marbles placed near it would naturally roll inward. In the same way, the craft bent space ahead and simply slid into that distortion. Travel became less about pushing forward and more about falling gracefully into a self-created well. Element 115 in his telling sat at the center of this miracle. At the time he first shared his account, the known periodic table stopped earlier, with heavier elements considered unstable and fleeting. Yet Lazar insisted that this particular element existed in a stable form within the craft's reactor. In his description, when bombarded with protons, the element generated a unique interaction, channeling gravitational energy. That concept baffled experts, who insisted no such material could exist stably. Then, decades later, laboratories succeeded in synthesizing element 115, now known as moscovium. The version created remained fleeting, decaying almost instantly, in contrast to the stable isotope Lazar described. Still, that detail reignited debates. How did Lazar predict the existence of such an element years before its discovery? Was it an inspired fabrication or an echo of lived reality? Once more, he stood at the uncomfortable border of disbelief and tantalizing possibility. The very idea of reverse engineering such craft carried profound implications. Lazar said he was part of a small team, each assigned fragments of the whole to study. Compartmentalization, ensuring no single group grasped the complete system. His role focused on propulsion, Others allegedly worked on metallurgy or biological research. According to him, security levels were intense, access narrow. He described daily transport in unmarked buses with blacked-out windows, so workers saw nothing of the route. The atmosphere framed secrecy upon secrecy. Employees compartmentalized to prevent any single voice from telling a complete story. Yet within his slice of access, Lazar maintained he witnessed demonstrations of the craft itself. Vehicles lifting soundlessly above the desert ground, defying not only engineering standards, but intuitive physics. For listeners yearning for marvels, these details painted an irresistible image. The desert floor, motionless and quiet, suddenly broken by a metallic saucer, lifting effortlessly, its edges shimmering faintly, no roar, no heat trail. The sense of awe blended with unease. If such machines truly existed, what did it mean about humanity's place in the cosmos? Why were they here? And why were they hidden away? Lazar suggested answers only indirectly. From his view, secrecy existed not to protect humanity from panic, but to maintain control, particularly the backward engineering of a technology potentially capable of reshaping geopolitics forever. If a limitless energy source could be harnessed, if near-light travel breakthroughs could be achieved, whoever controlled it might dominate all. Thus, secrecy was not benevolent, but strategic. Of course, many scientists scoffed. The descriptions violated known physics. Gravity manipulation on such a scale required energies beyond comprehension. Yet Lazar replied with an analogy. Just because ants crawling across a leaf cannot imagine airplanes, that does not mean airplanes do not exist. Humanity, in his picture, might be staring at an advanced technology centuries beyond its curve. Our failure to explain it did not erase its presence. And this contrast, skeptical certitude versus open-minded wonder, gave his narrative strength. Both sides found fuel, skeptics in the improbability, believers in the audacity. Imagery lingered longest in Lazar's storytelling. He described crouching within the disc-shaped interior, surfaces smooth and almost seamless, consoles without buttons in the conventional sense. He reminded his audience that what he saw felt not manufactured in the way our machinery does. No bolts, no weld lines, no obvious assembly. Everything appeared molded, as though grown rather than built. The impression was that of technology integrated rather than assembled. When he spoke of 3 gravity amplifier units, arranged predictably toward the base, he explained their alignment dictated flight direction, producing tilts of gravitational distortion guiding movement. Listeners pictured small glowing domes humming with quiet energy, bending the invisible, pulling the entire craft along gentle currents of space-time. To some, this imagery was beyond belief. Yet to others, it carried that peculiar ring of reality. Too eccentric, too technically odd, to be mere fantasy crafted for headlines. As Lazar concluded many of his accounts, he admitted frustration. He claimed the project advanced only marginally because of intense compartmentalization and lack of broad collaboration. Scientists worked as fragments, unable to combine expertise to accelerate progress. He also described constant surveillance, secrecy enforced under threat. The combination of wonder and oppression gave his time at S4 its unique flavor, blending discovery with intimidation. It was, in his telling, both thrilling and suffocating. To glimpse an object built by intelligence far beyond ours was exhilarating. To be forced into secrecy under threat of severe consequences was crushing. Between the two, he reached his breaking point, the decision to reveal what he knew. For the listener tonight, reclining under the desert sky, the intimacy of this account draws close. These were not merely lights in the heavens, but nuts, bolts, alloys, and reactors allegedly touched by human hands. Exotic craft, not imagined by poets, but studied by scientists within guarded hangars. The story presses on the boundary between dream and disclosure, and the question lingers gently, like a whisper through sagebrush. Could it be real? If so, what does it mean for our fragile picture of ourselves? That our machines crawl with combustion while someone else perfected the bending of time itself. As stars shimmer overhead in your imagination, Lazar's claim hovers too. He did not shout it. He spoke calmly, describing 9 alien craft, describing gravity amplifiers, describing reactors powered by exotic matter. Whether fabrication or revelation, his words ripple outward into nights like this, where listeners rest between belief and doubt. And that is where the story finds its home, not in proof, but in possibility. The desert is quiet, space is vast, and the human heart still bends toward wonder. There is perhaps no place on earth that better embodies both silence and speculation than the patch of desert known as Area 51. For decades, its name has conjured images of impenetrable fences, dusty roads ending in warning signs, and white trucks watching the horizon. Official documents long denied it even existed. Pilots flying overhead were told not to ask questions, and civilians driving too far along lonely Nevada highways encountered mounted cameras and stern placards declaring that trespassers would be prosecuted. The secrecy itself became a magnet for fascination. The more officials refused to comment, the more the public imagination filled the gaps with whispers of saucers, hangars full of alien wreckage, and scientists toiling over secrets too powerful to reveal. It is a perfect paradox, a place defined not by what is known, but by what has been hidden. Area 51 began in the 1950s with far more mundane origins. It was a test site for advanced military aircraft, hidden within the Nevada Test and Training Range. The remote desert setting, surrounded by mountains, provided secrecy from prying eyes. From this base, prototypes like the U-2 spy plane and later the SR-71 Blackbird first cut across the skies. To the military, Area 51 was a cloaked cradle for technological leaps in aviation. But to the outside world, its very invisibility made it mysterious. No names on maps, no public acknowledgement, only rumors of unusual flight paths above the desert. In the dark corners of Cold War secrecy, ordinary people looked up at strange lights and wondered, were those merely human craft or something beyond? This is where contrast frames the story. Officials spoke in silence, while the public spoke in curiosity. The Air Force guarded the fences. Eyewitnesses filled the void with stories. One group saw progress in stealth and reconnaissance. Another group saw evidence of EEG, extraterrestrial machines being tested in the night. The truth of experimental aircraft hid behind the curtain, but the curtain itself became more fascinating than the machinery. The refusal to admit what was happening gave every sighting a mysterious glow. Skeptics may argue the legends emerged entirely from secrecy without substance. Believers insist secrecy itself confirms the extraordinary. Each side looked to the same fences, same hangars, same desert silence, and walked away with entirely different beliefs. The landscape reinforces the legend. Think for a moment of Highway 375, a thin road stretching into desert emptiness, later renamed the Extraterrestrial Highway. Along its length, travelers see faded fences, desert scrub, and the occasional white truck stationed atop a hill. These guards, nicknamed Camo Dudes for their appearance, watch visitors with binoculars and cameras. never engaging, never speaking, only watching. It is a theater of intimidation and mystique, the unspeaking presence of men, ensuring that no one wanders too close to secrets. Such sights draw tourists, adventurers, and UFO enthusiasts alike, who camp along the highway at night with binoculars aimed skyward, hoping to spot something unusual above the Groom Lake Basin. The desert stars burn bright, and against those stars, even the smallest light seems full of meaning. Area 51's mystique grew within culture as well. During the Cold War, secrecy was patriotic, expected, even necessary. By the 1980s and beyond, secrecy plus mystery transformed into a legend all its own. Movies leaned on the setting for scenes of hidden recoveries and alien dissections. Television shows featured FBI agents and shadowy conspiracies, always pointing back toward that hidden base in Nevada. Documentaries framed it with ominous music, while locals turned it into roadside business. Motels offering alien-themed rooms, diners decorated with saucers, gift shops stocked with green figurines. Out of silence, an entire mythology blossomed. The government never needed to say a word. The culture wrote the script themselves. Still, beneath this layer of myth lies something both undeniable and unsettling: the extreme levels of secrecy surrounding the base. Photographs were forbidden, airspace above it restricted more tightly than anywhere else in the country. For years, commercial satellites avoided releasing images of its runways. Former workers rarely spoke, their identities hidden behind years of non-disclosure. Even attempts to request information through official channels often returned nothing but reams of redacted paper. The harder outsiders tried to penetrate the silence, the thicker the fog seemed to become. Skeptics will say, this is exactly what you would expect from any military installation working on sensitive technology. Believers counter that no ordinary secrecy could justify such erasure. Thus, the secrecy becomes less like a curtain and more like concrete, pressing curiosity against its surface without release. There is also the undeniable gravity of testimony. When Bob Lazar stepped forward in 1989, claiming not only to have been inside Area 51's orbit, but specifically within S4, secrecy framed his words with both credibility and suspicion. On one hand, where better to house alien technology than the most secret base known in America? On the other hand, the lack of openness ensured that almost no verifiable trail could support him. His claims lived in the shadows because the setting itself lives in the shadows. Every barred gate, every armed patrol, every silent guard scanning desert emptiness adds texture to his story. For believers, the secrecy validates him. For skeptics, the secrecy provides the perfect cover to invent fables. And so, once again, contrast shapes the legend. What is perhaps most captivating about Area 51 is how it turns the ordinary into extraordinary. A fence in ordinary life means harmless boundary. A fence in Groom Lake's desert becomes proof of secrets withheld. A truck on a hillside is just transportation anywhere else. Here it becomes an agent of mystery. Silence anywhere else feels calm. Here, silence feels pointed, as though the entire desert is listening back. The place becomes an outward mirror for our inward questions about power, trust, knowledge, and possibility. We fill the emptiness with our curiosities, and in doing so, the desert becomes a living canvas for imagination. Travelers often speak of the strange balance, serenity cloaking anxiety. They describe watching stars overhead while being reminded of cameras trained upon them from hills nearby. They feel both free in the desert air and trapped by invisible authority. There is no violence in the watching, no confrontation. And yet, there is no welcome either. It is precisely in this balance of presence and absence that Area 51 casts its spell. It offers the thrill of the forbidden without resolution, cloaking both the trivial and the extraordinary beneath the same opaque blanket. Ultimately, Area 51 stands as more than a military base. It has become an icon of secrecy itself. Some interpret that icon as a monument to human advancement, others as a vault of unearthly wonders. Yet most agree on one thing: the fascination will never disappear. The government can deny, films can dramatize, skeptics can dismiss, but the allure remains resilient. It grows stronger not because we know what lies inside, but because we do not. That is the unique power of silence. It magnifies curiosity. In contrast to the sprawling openness of the Nevada desert, Area 51 offers a condensed beam of mystery, so concentrated that it reaches far beyond its fences. Thus tonight, in the story we share, Area 51 is not just a base, but a shadowy character itself. It has no voice, and yet speaks volumes through omission. It hides behind fences, yet sprawls across imaginations worldwide. It silences insiders, yet inspires endless questions from outsiders. It exists somewhere between confirmed reality and unconfirmable speculation. And while officials maintain composure in their silence, culture keeps stirring the fire, weaving music, films, documentaries, testimonies, and roadside diners into a living legend. Between those poles lies the heartbeat of the myth, a government base that says nothing, and a public that will never stop asking, what is it hiding? When Bob Lazar's story first reached the public, it landed like a stone in a still pond, creating ripples that continue to move outward decades later. Those ripples, however, did not spread evenly. They fractured into different directions, separating into currents of belief and skepticism, fascination and dismissal. For every person who declared Lazar the bravest whistleblower of his era, another insisted he was, at best, a storyteller embellishing his resume, and at worst, a fraud. To listen to his name in conversation is often to hear it framed with caveats. Maybe, possibly, if true. The divide Lazar created is as important as the claims themselves, for it highlights a fascinating tension in human nature, our simultaneous hunger for truth, and our caution against deception. On one side stand the believers. To many, Lazar is nothing less than a courageous truth-teller who risked his reputation and safety to reveal what he had witnessed inside the shadowed facilities beyond Groom Lake. They argue that his calm manner, his willingness to subject himself to relentless scrutiny, and the way his claims intersected with later discoveries, such as the eventual identification of Element 115, provide compelling reasons to trust him. In their eyes, he did what few dare to do. He looked upon secrets too large for any one country to hold and chose to speak to the wider world. Believers often note that few people would voluntarily place themselves under such suspicion without some deeper conviction driving them. Why would Lazar accept threats, ridicule, and the dismantling of his privacy if there were no truth behind his words? For these listeners, his credibility rests not merely on what he said, but on what he risked by saying it. They point to specific elements of his story that resonate in ways difficult to dismiss. His descriptions of S4 and its hangars, reportedly carved into the hillside, match the kind of concealment techniques later confirmed at other secret facilities. His knowledge of unusual sightlines and security procedures aligns with what workers and pilots have whispered in other contexts, and the mention of element 115 years before its eventual synthesis suggests either outstanding foresight or the echo of genuine exposure to classified materials. To the believing camp, the balance of probabilities tilts toward Lazar being genuine. He might have gaps in his background, perhaps even deliberate clouds, but such irregularities, they say, are simply the fingerprints of a system intent on erasing his trace. On the other side stand the skeptics, no less passionate in their rejection. For them, Lazar's story collapses under the weight of missing credentials. They scrutinize his claims to have attended prestigious institutions like MIT and Caltech, only to find no records supporting those degrees. Universities deny knowledge of him as a student, professors do not recall his presence, and transcripts remain absent. To skeptics, this is no small matter. A physicist without traceable training is like a surgeon with no medical license. The gaps are not minor, they say. They are gaping holes. Similarly, his assertions of employment at Los Alamos National Laboratory encountered resistance. While phone directories of that era did mention his name, official records denied formal employment. To the critical eye, such contradictions outweigh the seduction of his larger story. After all, if the foundation is unstable, how much faith can rest on the structure built upon it? Skeptics also focus on the physics, manipulating gravity fields, bending space-time with handheld reactors, traveling across the galaxy in hours. These concepts, they argue, violate the known laws of nature. While science is ever evolving, certain boundaries remain firm. The energy required to warp space in the way Lazar described would be astronomical, far beyond reasonable containment. The idea of a stable isotope of element 115 with those extraordinary properties has never emerged in verified research. To skeptics, Lazar's technical framing does not read as authentic insider knowledge. It sounds, instead, like an enthusiast borrowing from speculative physics and science fiction to craft an alluring narrative. The consistency of his story, in their view, is not a mark of truth, but a mark of rehearsed repetition. The divide between believers and skeptics often comes back to a single set of reflective questions. If Lazar told the truth, why do his educational and employment records appear so elusive? Were they erased deliberately, as he and his supporters suggest, to cripple his credibility? Could a system adept at secrecy obliterate a man's history with calculated precision? Or, if he was not truthful, then another question arises. Why has his story endured for so long, and so strongly, without collapsing under scrutiny? Most frauds fade quickly, yet Lazar's tale persists, debated in documentaries, podcasts, and late-night conversations around the world. Does this endurance speak to hidden truth, or to the power of humanity's unquenchable desire for mystery? Believers emphasize the erasure argument. They argue that Lazar's educational background was deliberately wiped, his records purged, not because he fabricated them, but because removing them ensured public doubt. After all, what better way to weaken a whistleblower than to cast shadows on their credibility? If evidence that might support his claims is hidden or destroyed, then to the public, he becomes easy prey. Skeptics counter this idea with sharp rebuttals. Universities are not military facilities, they say, and university records are notoriously difficult to erase in totality. Hundreds of classmates, professors, transcripts, and yearbooks would leave trails. To doubters, the absence of corroboration is not evidence of conspiracy, but of invention. The tension between these readings is where the debate flourishes. The same gaps mean different things to different camps. And so, two parallel narratives march on. In one, Bob Lazar was a man recruited into secrets beyond comprehension, stripped of credentials in a campaign to discredit him, and left as a lone messenger of strange truths. In the other, he was a man with an inventive mind and a flair for storytelling, attaching himself to the growing mythology of UFOs during the late 1980s, amplifying his reputation with tales that resonated not because they were real, but because they were entertaining and timely. Each camp looks at the same evidence, but interprets it through different filters. One sees suppression of truth, the other exaggeration and error. What makes this divide more compelling than many is its civility in tone. Even skeptics often admit that Lazar himself seems genuinely convinced of his account, and many believers acknowledge the strangeness of the missing records. The man himself does not shout from rooftops or lead rallies. He offers his account and leaves the audience to decide. In that sense, Lazar becomes less a definitive answer and more a mirror reflecting the audience's predispositions. Do you trust the voice of an ordinary man over the absence of institutional proof, or do you trust records over stories that cannot be substantiated? Each listener, each reader, bends toward one answer or the other. It is worth noting, too, that belief and disbelief do not remain static. Some who first dismissed Lazar later softened after element 115 was recognized in laboratories. Others who once believed have grown doubtful with time, their skepticism nurtured by decades of absence in confirming evidence. The divide is fluid, shaped by new events and personal reflection. What endures is not universal agreement, but perpetual discussion. This is the hallmark of a story powerful enough to resist conclusion. It continues to move, inviting curiosity, skepticism, wonder, and critique, all without fading completely into silence. Tonight, under the canopy of stars, the divide itself tells the story. Here stands a man, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in claim. Around him gather listeners with divided hearts, half pulled toward conviction, half toward caution. The arguments echo across campfires, conferences, and late-night radio waves. The truth lies hidden, either beneath government vaults or beneath layers of fiction. But the debate itself is revealing. Why do we need this story so much? Why do we wrestle with it still, even without closure? Is it because we long to know our place in the universe, or because we resist deception with equal strength? The divide does not weaken the narrative, it sustains it. One side sharpens the other, disbelief intensifying belief, belief sharpening doubt. And in that tension, Bob Lazar's name lives on, not as settled fact, but as an enduring question mark. Whether hero or hoax, messenger or mythmaker, his story has become larger than himself. It is the desert mystery in human form, forever tugging between conviction and uncertainty. And as long as the fences of Area 51 stand, his name will continue to echo along them, asking the same subtle questions we now pass along to the night. What is hidden? Who decides what we may know? And above all, what if he was telling the truth? When Bob Lazar first stepped into public view in 1989, he did more than offer a story about technology hidden in the Nevada desert. He unwittingly ignited a cultural wave, one that rippled far beyond news reports and interviews, spilling into film, television, radio, bookstores, and roadside diners. His revelations came at a curious crossroads in history, a time when paranoia about government secrecy overlapped with a blossoming fascination for the fantastic. The late 1980s were already rich with questions about cover-ups, mysteries, and secret programs. The Cold War was winding down, The technological age was accelerating, and the collective imagination was hungry for narratives that blended fear and wonder. Into this fertile cultural soil, Lazar dropped his account like a spark. A solitary man claiming to work on alien spacecraft within the shadows of Area 51 became not merely a headline, but an enduring motif of late 20th century myth-making. Television was quick to recognize the appeal. Late-night news programs and local interviews in Las Vegas built the initial platform, but soon radio shows like Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell amplified the voice to a national audience. Millions of listeners tuned in, night after night, transported by stories of UFOs, government secrecy, and encounters at the edges of belief. Bob Lazar's testimony about S4 and the alien craft became a cornerstone, referenced alongside other classic mysteries. His name joined the constellation of cultural shorthand, where to mention Area 51 no longer meant only a secret base, but the potential of extraterrestrial technology hidden from humanity. These broadcasts reshaped ordinary living rooms into theaters of speculation, their gentle static and late-hour tone perfectly suited for drifting imaginations. At the same time, Hollywood was listening. The early 1990s delivered a surge of UFO-themed entertainment. Films portrayed stealthy government agents, unknown craft streaking across the skies, and laboratories dissecting beings from far beyond. Some scenes mirrored Lazar's descriptions uncannily: saucer-shaped craft stored in hangars, strange propulsion systems powering silent ascents. Whether by direct inspiration or the gravitational pull of his story within cultural memory, Lazar's influence threaded itself into narrative art. Even blockbuster films used Area 51 as a shorthand for hidden contact, where underground hangars not only stored alien machines, but entire histories withheld from public view. The secret base became cinematic stage, and Lazar's whistleblowing contributed to why audiences found those portrayals not only entertaining, but plausible. Meanwhile, bookstores filled with shelves devoted to UFO phenomena. Paperbacks carried dramatic covers, glowing lights, frightened witnesses, classified stamps. Lazar's story stood prominently in these collections. Authors debated him, cited him, challenged him, or defended him. Skeptical works dissected the holes in his claimed background, while sympathetic volumes pointed to corroborations and cultural synchronicities. Even scientists were tempted into print, compelled not necessarily to weigh belief, but to address public curiosity swelling around topics they once considered fringe. And in each work, one aspect returned like an anchor: the simple image of a man in Nevada, calm in demeanor, claiming to have touched technology that could bend space-time. Literature, in its many tones, reflected the divide and fascination. The cultural impact was not confined to media alone. Small towns near the desert highways began to absorb and reframe the mythology into local identity. In Rachel, Nevada, residents opened the Little Ailey Inn, a modest stop along the extraterrestrial highway, where alien imagery decorated signs and souvenirs. Tourists from across the world visited not merely for landscapes, but for the thrill of proximity to mystery. Bob Lazar's revelations fueled this tourism subtly but powerfully. He had provided the connection, a living testimony that something unusual might, in fact, sit behind those distant ridges. Pilgrims arrived with binoculars and cameras, scanning the skies in hope of catching the same glimpses Lazar once described. The desert evolved into a cultural theater, where reality and imagination wove together on picnic blankets beneath stars. Popular culture also framed Lazar's story as part of a larger archetype: the lone whistleblower. In American storytelling traditions, characters who defy authority to reveal hidden truths often become heroine, see figures. From journalists exposing scandals to insiders challenging corporations, the narrative resonates deeply. When placed against the epic backdrop of extraterrestrial secrecy, Lazar fit this mold effortlessly. He was cast, not by Hollywood, but by the public imagination, as an accidental protagonist of mystery. The archetype amplified his account, placing him in line with stories people already knew how to consume. To disbelief or belief, it hardly mattered. The role of the reluctant truth-teller embedded him in the mythos. The 1990s fostered an environment particularly receptive to such myths. Conspiracies found fertile ground against the backdrop of surveillance fears, technological acceleration, and geopolitical shifts. A younger generation raised on moon landings and space stations wanted to believe humanity stood near yet another threshold. Lazar's testimony, with its understated delivery and extraordinary implications, provided exactly that. He did not thunder about catastrophe. He calmly suggested humanity already possessed the keys to the stars, hidden in deserts, sealed in hangars. This very contrast, extraordinary content in an ordinary voice, made his message adaptable to television specials, documentaries, magazine spreads, and science fiction alike. The narrative could be thrilling, frightening, hopeful, or skeptical, without losing the kernel of intrigue. As the internet began to emerge toward the mid-1990s, message boards and early websites carried Lazar's name quickly. Discussions multiplied, debates flared, documents were scanned, and grainy photos circulated along digital highways. In online culture, myths thrive in fragments, and Lazar's testimony provided endless fragments to interpret. Some quoted his physics claims, others dissected his personal inconsistencies, while still more tied his narrative into the broader patchwork of abductions, Roswell, and government secrecy. By the time UFO culture merged with the digital age, Bob Lazar had become inseparable from the Area 51 brand of mystery. And so, the man and the myth evolved hand in hand. Lazar did not build this culture alone. UFO fascination existed long before him. Yet, his revelations arrived with precise timing, pushing the mythology into a new phase. Where earlier lore emphasized lights in the distance, his testimony drew audiences into workshops and reactors. He replaced distant unknowables with specific details: 9 craft, S4, gravity amplifiers, element 115. These details gave popular culture tangible images around which to orbit. Alien technology was no longer merely imagined. It was now contextualized with hangar doors and laboratory benches, delivered in a voice so calm it sounded memorized from daily work. Reflecting on this period, one sees both the durability and fragility of public imagination. On one hand, skeptics found Lazar's claims riddled with implausibility, gaps, and inconsistencies. On the other hand, popular culture embraced them not necessarily as truth, but as inspiration. His story lent its DNA to entertainment, tourism, art, music, documentaries, and conversation. In doing so, Lazar became not only a character in UFO history, but a cultural catalyst for how mysteries are told. Even now, decades later, his name carries associatio, shaped as much by Hollywood and folklore as by testimony itself. That endurance reveals something profound. Whether fact or fiction, humans crave mysteries large enough to expand imaginations, to stretch the limits of ordinary life. Picture the late nights of the 1990s, televisions glowing softly, radios crackling, computers humming their first online connections. In each space, voices discussed Bob Lazar. For some, he was a fraud. For others, a prophet. For all, he was a presence. His revelations threaded themselves into the atmosphere, impossible to disentangle from the cultural air of the time. And through that, UFO mythology flourished, not as a marginal obsession, but as a mainstream conversation. The desert secrets had entered the living rooms of millions. There is something deeply human about gazing into the night sky, waiting for a glimmer of the unusual. Long before Bob Lazar spoke of hidden crafts and reverse engineering, and long before Area 51 found its place in pop culture lexicons, locals living along the margins of the Nevada test and training range were already telling stories of lights that did not move like stars, satellites, or ordinary planes. These were lights that floated, darted, hovered, and sometimes blinked away entirely, leaving behind breathless observers with more questions than answers. Accounts like these are scattered across decades, born not from laboratories or television studios, but from folding chairs, blankets on desert ground, and curious eyes, tracing the heavens above Groom Lake. Locals in the towns nearest Area 51 often speak of evenings spent scanning the skies. Rachel, a small town with only a handful of streets and a reputation immortalized by the extraterrestrial highway, serves as the unofficial front porch of Area 51 watchers. From here, families, travelers, and UFO enthusiasts gather at night, bringing lawn chairs, coolers, and the sort of patience only desert stillness can inspire. Children grow up with the routine, parents pointing out odd pinpoints of light, explaining that they could be nothing more than military exercises, or perhaps something far stranger. Folks sip coffee from thermoses, wrapped in blankets, while coyotes yelp on the ridgelines. The atmosphere is unlike any other, relaxed, communal, yet laden with anticipation that at any moment the sky might reveal something extraordinary. Descriptions of these lights vary, but themes repeat with uncanny consistency. Some witnesses speak of orange orbs glowing steadily, much brighter than stars, which hover for minutes before sliding silently across the horizon. Others record sudden bursts of light streaking across great distances with no sound, vanishing like someone flipping a switch. There are accounts of lights executing sharp turns at impossible speeds, maneuvers no jet or conventional aircraft could replicate without tearing itself apart. Still others describe formations, groups of lights arranged in patterns, flying slowly together, as if following paths rehearsed long before. Against the starkly clear desert sky, where stars reveal themselves in thousands, such anomalies feel magnified and alive. For skeptics, the explanations are clear: military flares, experimental aircraft, satellites reflecting sunlight, or illusions caused by atmospheric distortion in the desert air. And indeed, the Nevada test and training range is no ordinary airspace. It has hosted the test, being of aircraft decades ahead of their time. Many sightings, some skeptics say, trace back to stealth planes, drones, or ongoing simulations veiled in secrecy. But for believers, something about the fluidity of these lights and their repeated defiance of familiar flight patterns insists on an otherworldly explanation. One person's flare is another person's visitation. The desert, it turns out, provides fertile ground for both interpretations, and the truth becomes tangled between technical possibility and human imagination. The phenomenon is not limited to a handful of residents. Travelers who make the pilgrimage to the extraterrestrial highway often return with stories. In the cool evenings, groups gather along the back roads, reclining in camp chairs, their radios tuned low, their telescopes scanning beyond the naked eye. Some bring cameras, others keep journals. What unites them is the ritual, waiting, watching, and allowing stillness to become a pathway toward wonder. Time slows in those moments. An hour may pass with nothing unusual, but the anticipation heightens every star, every streak of light. The longer they watch, the more they feel they might be participants in some cosmic lottery, that the desert may gift a performance on its own unpredictable schedule. Eyewitness accounts often carry a consistent emotional weight. Few describe terror. Most describe awe. Some feel a childlike joy in seeing lights that puzzle their minds. Others describe an unsettled calm, as though witnessing something profound, yet deliberately evasive. The absence of sound, over and over, is highlighted. Unlike jets that roar into the night, these lights glide as if pressing through the sky, with no need for engines or airflow. A farmer on a porch, a truck driver pausing along the highway, a tourist with binoculars near Groom Lake. Their testimonies share this same reverent quiet. The sky above Area 51 is not just dark space. It becomes alive with suggestion, and each viewer adds a new thread to the fabric of shared folklore. Yet the divide between believers and skeptics persists within these stories. To those seeking rational answers, witnesses too often misinterpret natural or mechanical events. For example, military flares dropped during training exercises in the ranges can easily resemble glowing orbs drifting silently in formation. Likewise, experimental aircraft like the stealth fighters of earlier decades exhibited shapes and lights unfamiliar to civilian eyes. Once those projects were eventually declassified, skeptics argued, the UFO sightings that matched their outlines suddenly made sense. Still, this explanation does not satisfy everyone. Too many patterns linger. Too many maneuvers go unmatched by conventional aircraft. Too many years stretch across the accounts. Flares descend downward, skeptics note. Witnesses describe lights that rise upward, hover indefinitely, or vanish abruptly. Could all of these memories be mistaken? Or is there a remainder unexplained? Something that invites a wider lens of interpretation? Consider the perspective of those who live near this desert corridor for years. To them, the occasional strange lights are not myth, but part of the background of life. They watch them as regularly as storms or sunsets, acknowledging them with the calm acceptance that not every detail of existence must make sense to human eyes. They tell stories casually at diners, passing them along not as proof, but as experience. Their way of describing is humble, often without agenda. This is what I saw. This is what I remember. That modesty renders some accounts particularly compelling. These individuals are not chasing headlines. They are recounting pieces of their evenings under stars, noting something unusual with the same steady voice they use to describe the weather. The cultural gathering points, such as the Black Mailbox site, once popular with skywatchers, became magnets for such stories. People convened in the middle of the desert night, lawn chairs arranged in circles, headlights extinguished, scanning the skies together. Some came alone, others in groups, united by patient anticipation. They discussed Lazar, debated whether the lights were connected to his accounts at S4, and traded theories ranging from secret test flights to visitors from distant star systems. There was camaraderie among them, even if their beliefs diverged. The act of watching itself bonded them. To wait together in uncertainty is to cultivate empathy. Nobody could guarantee whether a sighting would occur, but everyone shared the suspense of possibility, allowing even skeptics to smile when a bright streak crossed the heavens. sparking a few moments of collective thrill. This balance of skepticism and belief reaffirms something timeless about humanity. We are a species drawn upward, eyes tilted toward sky, perpetually imagining. Whether the lights are flares, craft, or illusions, the act of interpreting them binds communities. At night, under the same canopy that guided ancient navigators and storytellers, locals and travelers echo the same gestures of wonder. They point, they speculate, they ask each other softly, "Did you see that?" It is a question older than Lazar and older than Area 51. It is the question of every age, every culture, every dream-laden night, when something unexplained darts across the horizon. And so, these witness accounts, whether ordinary or extraordinary, weave themselves into the fabric of Area 51's reputation. Without them, the mythology would lack its most important element, the human response. Because it is not only Lazar's words or Hollywood's dramatizations that keep the legend alive. It is also the voices of farmers, truckers, tourists, and teenagers who sat outside together, watching lights dance across desert skies. Their words, unpolished and direct, ensure that the story is grounded not only in secrecy and speculation, but in lived experience. Through them, we are reminded that mystery is not always delivered with news conferences or scientific jargon. Sometimes it flickers softly above a desert ridge, noted by ordinary people sipping coffee from thermoses and wrapped in blankets against the evening chill. And here lies the real heart of these strange lights. Their power is not confined to their phenomenon, whatever that may be. Their power is in their effect. They gather people together under wide Nevada skies. They fuel conversations lasting long after the lights vanish. And they inspire that curious cocktail of awe and humility that pulls us gently towards sleep. Whether natural, technological, or otherworldly, the lights leave us with a single thought, that in our vast universe, mystery will always find us if we are willing to look up long enough. When the name Bob Lazar surfaces in conversation, one phrase often follows quickly after. It defies the laws of physics. His description of gravity manipulation, of element 115 fueling reactors capable of bending space-time, treads into territory where most scientists shake their heads. To them, the story violates fundamental principles that appear unbreakable. Yet, to others, his claims fall not in the category of impossible, but of not yet possible. In that divide lies a story less about one man's testimony and more about the nature of science itself. A discipline built on certainty, and yet always reshaped by discoveries that once seemed absurd. To begin, physicists often cite energy requirements as the first and clearest objection. Manipulating gravity is no small feat. Gravity is by far the weakest of the fundamental forces, and its manipulation on a useful scale would require staggering amounts of energy. Einstein's general relativity showed long ago that gravity is not a simple push or pull, but the curvature of space and time itself. To warp space-time enough to create gravity waves capable of propelling craft would demand, in the words of many scientists, energy equal to that of stars. The human race, still struggling with fossil fuels and fragile fission reactors, seems light years away from commanding the cosmos with such ease. From this view, Lazar's reactor resembles a fairy tale, mesmerizing, but untethered from practical science. Even his central claim, element 115, invites skepticism. When Lazar revealed his story in 1989, the periodic table ended with element 109. Chemists assumed that heavier elements, if synthesized, would rapidly decay within fractions of seconds. His claim of a stable isotope of element 115, capable of interaction with gravitational fields, seemed unimaginable. 2 decades later, laboratories in Russia and later in Japan succeeded in creating element 115, formally named moscovium. But as early predictions suggested, it was fleeting, existing only for milliseconds before decaying. This aligned with mainstream physics, but clashed with Lazar's insistence on a long-lived form powering reactors. Critics highlight this as definitive proof of exaggeration. To them, this is the fingerprint of science fiction, weaving itself into his testimony, clothed in technical vocabulary for effect. And yet, the picture is not so neatly closed. For science, impossibility is a demanding word. What one era deems impossible, another quietly incorporates into textbooks. Consider heavier-than-air flight. Centuries of thinkers dismissed it until the Wright brothers' machine lifted from sandy soil. The idea of splitting the atom, once laughed at, turned into the defining technology of the 20th century. Space travel, once the realm of pulp magazine fantasy, became a reality within a single human lifetime. Skeptics who scorned impossibility were not wrong in their framework, but their predictions underestimated human ingenuity. Might Lazar's claims fit a similar pattern, lodged not in current sciences, but in future breakthroughs? That question, delicate and speculative, remains central to his resonance. Scientists, even while dismissing specifics of Lazar's story, do engage with certain possibilities. The concept of using exotic matter, or negative energy densities, to manipulate space-time has appeared in serious research. Theoretical physicist Miguel Alcubierre, in 1994, proposed a warp drive concept, where a bubble of space-time could contract ahead of a craft and expand behind it, allowing faster-than-light travel without breaking relativity. The catch? The math requires negative energy densities of a type we have no clear method of producing. Still, the proposal, albeit speculative, illustrates that bending space-time is not considered completely impossible, simply far beyond our reach. To those sympathetic to Lazar, this echoes his suggestion that alien technology may already accomplish what we cannot yet. To skeptics, Alcubierre's equations are theoretical exercises, not evidence that Lazar's gravity amplifiers exist. So how does one gently unpack what might actually be possible? First, it matters to separate present science from the boundaries of unknown science. And see? What Lazar described is absurd according to today's toolkit, but to dismiss it absolutely risks repeating the mistake made throughout history whenever new physics was born. Quantum mechanics once defied comprehension. Lasers were called a solution in search of a problem. Black holes once seemed nothing more than math riddles. Each became central to our understanding and technology. In this way, Lazar's narrative serves less as literal physics lecture and more as symbolic reminder of humility. We likely do not yet know all there is to know. From a storytelling perspective, one must note Lazar's calmness in explaining physics. He did not embellish his tale with grandiose jargon. Instead, he reached for analogies: balls on a trampoline, falling into wells, amplifiers angled to bend nearby fields. His metaphors made complicated speculation feel within reach of ordinary listeners. This is perhaps why his story clung so firmly to cultural imagination. It seemed both scientific and conversational. Yet scientists point out that analogies are not evidence. They are bridges, and bridges can be built toward wrong destinations. Still, the artistry of explanation, its accessibility, gave him an aura of authenticity in many ears. The skeptics counter further with practical considerations. A reactor capable of bending space-time, if operated on Earth, should produce measurable energetic footprints, radiation bursts, gravitational ripples, or something extraordinary beyond the ordinary. No such evidence has emerged. Similarly, 9 alien craft, allegedly stored at S4, should eventually leave whiffs of documentation or corroboration from staffers over the decades. Very few voices have surfaced, and those who did were quickly dismissed. But believers argue, how could one expect evidence from programs designed for secrecy? By definition, absence reinforces possibility. If science cannot yet confirm, and secrecy conceals, then Lazar becomes the singular lens through which the story persists. This tension between impossibility and possibility reveals deeper truths about our relationship with science. On one hand, science is the pursuit of falsifiability and evidence. Without data, without replicable outcomes, stories remain no more than stories. On the other hand, curiosity stretches science forward, often carried by wild hypotheses that border on fiction until tested. In this way, believing Lazar's physics is not a requirement to appreciate the philosophical echo of his tale. It challenges us gently. Are we so sure about what cannot be done? Or do we live in an age that simply has not seen far enough yet? To give this reflection weight, it helps to revisit the human scale. Picture an engineer in 1900 confronted with a smartphone. To them, it would be impossible. A glowing glass screen streaming voices across continents without wires. To the modern hand, it is ordinary. The difference is not physics, but time. Could the same principle apply if humankind encounters technologies 1,000 years beyond us? Would they not, standing in hangars, seem miraculous, even when later textbooks explain them with equations as calmly as we explain combustion engines today? The Nevada desert itself almost seems to argue for patience. Its mountains stood unchanged for millennia, quietly bearing witness to civilizations rising and falling. Perhaps secrets of space and gravity exist just as patiently, waiting for experience to catch up with possibility. If Lazar is wrong, he is one of many dreamers who stretched imagination further than evidence allowed. If Lazar is right, then his words are a quiet preview of a horizon science will someday reach. Either outcome still serves a purpose: to sharpen our humility, to remind us how much and how little we know. And so beneath the calm desert night, as the stars arc steadily above Groom Lake, science speaks in method, while Terry speaks in silence. Lazar's descriptions sit uneasily between the two, dismissed by laboratories, but cherished by dreamers. Both perspectives are valid in their domains. One safeguards truth, the other safeguards wonder. Somewhere between impossibility and possibility lies our collective yearning to understand. Perhaps the final verdict remains in the future, waiting in test papers not yet written, waiting in experiments not yet dared. For now, his story floats like those strange lights above the ranges, elusive, unverified, but powerful enough to stir imaginations awake before gently nesting them into dreams. Decades have slipped quietly by since Bob Lazar first appeared on television, his voice hesitant, his face shadowed, revealing claims that shook public imagination. In those years, governments have changed hands, new wars have begun and ended, and technologies have reshaped daily life. Yet Lazar's story endures. In a world where so much of yesterday's news dissolves like mist, his account has proven strangely resistant to time. Whether one regards him as visionary or con artist, reluctant prophet or clever storyteller, his words continue to echo. And perhaps that persistence is the most fascinating legacy of all. Consider how uncommon it is for a single man's testimony to remain so fertile. Lazar offered no physical craft, no indisputable evidence, no laboratory data written on peer-reviewed pages. Yet still, his narrative remains part of the DNA of modern mystery. This endurance suggests that what matters is not only what he said, but what the story reveals about us. Humans, after all, are drawn to questions that exceed certainty. When a tale stretches beyond what can be neatly explained, it becomes not weaker, but stronger. It moves from the realm of fact into myth, and once in myth, it rarely fades. Over time, Lazar's story has been reintroduced to new audiences. His accounts found renewed life in documentaries, podcasts, and streaming platforms. Younger generations encountered him not through late-night radio, but through polished interviews on digital screens. Each revival breathes air into the embers. For the curious, he is a figure who never fully retreats. Even his energy remains consistent. Calm tone, careful answers, rare public appearances. Unlike those who monetize every angle of fame, he stays reserved, almost reluctant. This subtlety paradoxically makes him more compelling. His absence, his refusal to embellish, strengthens the impression that his story is self-sustaining, needing no constant promotion. At the same time, Area 51 itself grew into something larger than Lazar could have expected. Once a discreet facility denied for decades, it has become an icon, occupying the strange intersection of secrecy and satire. Officially, it is known now as part of the Nevada Test and Training Range. Unofficially, it is shorthand for all things covert, a symbol of what the government keeps hidden. It is invoked in jokes, in memes, in roadside advertisements, and even in mass internet pranks. The 2019 Storm Area 51 event, originating as a social media joke, drew millions of online responses and thousands of actual visitors to Nevada. Few seriously sought to breach the gates, but the fact that so many expressed curiosity illustrates how deeply Area 51 has burrowed into the public consciousness. It is no longer just a location. It is folklore layered with humor, excitement, and quiet reverence. Here lies the paradox of the legacy. Secrecy and laughter live side by side. On one hand, people create cartoons of aliens sipping sodas at gas stations, jokes about green figures working 9-to-5 shifts inside bunkers. On the other hand, real inquiries persist within academia and journals about unidentified aerial phenomena. Governments themselves have recently acknowledged new military footage showing objects behaving in ways not easily explained. This delicate thread between jest and seriousness keeps the subject alive. We laugh because we imagine. We wonder because sometimes laughter falters into awe. Thus, Area 51, with Lazar as its patron storyteller, balances precariously between parody and profound mystery. Part of his continuing influence lies in timing. His revelations emerged just as modern conspiracy culture took root, when secrecy became synonymous with potential wonder. As decades unfolded, the appetite for stories involving hidden truths only grew. Yet what differentiates Lazar from countless other claimants is the way he occupied both extremes at once. Skeptics and believers alike needed him. The skeptics pointed to him as the perfect example of pseudoscience. Believers lifted him as a rare insider. Both sides ensured his name remained woven into discussion. Few figures achieve such balance. equally useful to dismiss and to defend. This duality sustains his longevity. And then there is the quiet pull of the unknown itself. Even if one assumes Lazar fabricated some or all of his claims, the sheer possibility that any part may contain truth is intoxicating. What if one reactor, one craft, one description holds even a grain of authenticity? That tiny chance, however remote, sustains an endless loop of speculation. Secrecy feeds this dynamic like oxygen feeds fire. Silence from officials breeds possibilities. Denials feel less convincing than simple absence, for absence allows imagination to roam freely. Each locked gate, each blurred satellite image, becomes not a closed statement, but an unfinished sentence awaiting completion. The memification of Area 51 cannot be ignored, for it reveals how humans adapt mystery into communal play. People shared parody posters of millions running across desert sands, memes of cartoon aliens waiting to be rescued, and humorous skits about governments hiding galactic pets in underground hangars. What could have been a simple internet joke turned into a cultural moment that embedded Area 51 not just in conspiracy circles, but in mainstream humor. And yet behind the satire lurked a quiet seriousness. Millions felt the tug of curiosity strongly enough to participate, even in jest. A joke this enduring is rarely only a joke. It reflects the universal itch that we suspect, perhaps long for, answers resting somewhere beyond the fences. For Lazar himself, reinvestigation has come periodically. Documentaries and interviews reintroduce his claims with polished lenses. New faces find him, listen, and rediscover the paradox that keeps him afloat, so ordinary in presence, so extraordinary in story. Reporters ask him if he regrets speaking out, and his answers remain familiar. Yes, he faced grave difficulty, but he does not retract. Each restatement, consistent in tone, builds a cumulative weight. Decades later, he still insists upon what he first shared. There are no significant alterations in his narrative, no constant embellishments. For believers, this consistency bolsters credibility. For skeptics, it simply shows practiced repetition. Either way, the legend continues. What then is the legacy of secrets? In one sense, it lies in the endurance of uncertainty itself. Lazar may never be proven right, nor definitively wrong. Area 51 may never release its deepest secrets, if such secrets even exist. But the story's persistence across generations proves that mystery functions as a cultural nutrient. We need enigmas, not simply answers. We are sustained not only by knowledge, but by the chase for knowledge. True or false, revelations such as Lazar's serve as magnets that point us toward curiosity, inviting reflections about power, authority, and humanity's place in the cosmos. In another sense, the legacy lies in transformation. What was once whispered in shadows and reported in hushed tones has become global shorthand, celebrated and mocked all at once. Area 51 began as sealed silence. Now it is equally an entertainment symbol and research touchstone. Lazar began as a hesitant whistleblower. Now he is equal parts cultural myth and enduring riddle, invoked across mediums and generations. Secrecy begot curiosity, curiosity begot culture, and culture immortalized the very secrecy it set out to unravel. Perhaps the most profound legacy is the gentle reminder embedded within. Some mysteries cannot be resolved neatly. They are not puzzles with answers, but mirrors meant to reflect our desires, doubts, and yearnings. Bob Lazar's name persists because it stirs the balance between belief and skepticism, certainty and longing. Area 51 endures in imagination because it represents the veil that separates what we are told from what we suspect. That veil, no matter how much laughter and parody surround it, still holds our attention. And at night, when the desert grows quiet and the fences cut against starlight, one can still feel the weight of those secrets pressing outward, shaping myths, sparking questions, and weaving themselves into dreams. The desert night has grown still now. Earlier conversations linger softly in memory, the names and stories of Bob Lazar and Area 51 drifting like faint echoes across the sand. Yet the deeper the hour, the quieter everything becomes, as though both debate and speculation finally surrender their voices to silence. In this silence, the Nevada desert comes alive in its most tranquil form, endless stretches of darkened earth under a vault of stars. Those secret fences, those guarded gates, even those whispered tales of hidden hangars, all recede behind you as your gaze lifts gently skyward. What remains above is not controversy, but cosmos. What remains within is not argument, but awe. The stars do not answer. They do not deny. They simply shine, steady as they have for ages, scattering light to any who lift their eyes long enough to notice. The desert at night has always been a place of clarity. During the day, heat creates distortion across the horizon. Distances ripple, mirages stretch and quiver. At night, everything sharpens. Air cools, winds soften, and the vastness reveals itself with pure honesty. Each star above feels closer, more luminous, framed against a black canvas deep enough to swallow thought. The stillness settles into your breathing. Time itself feels slower, as if conversations and decades and controversies lie far away, replaced by the rhythm of your chest rising and falling beneath this infinite ceiling. You can almost forget the technology, the secrecy, the speculation. There is only you, the desert floor beneath your body, and stars so countless they outnumber your questions. And yet, questions do linger, softly now, not with urgency, but with gentleness. The mysteries of S4, the theories of propulsion bending space, the testimonies of strange lights above Groom Lake. They hum faintly in memory, like distant music, barely audible through desert air. Questions that once seemed heavy with consequence now float more lightly. Could Lazar have been telling the truth? Could spacecraft from worlds beyond ours truly have rested just over those ridges, hidden from public view? Or might it all have been woven from exaggeration and imagination? His words folded neatly into the broader mythology of secrecy and belief. The desert offers no answers to such wonderings. It listens, as it always has, offering the same quiet canvas to speculation and to silence alike. What is most remarkable, perhaps, is the way mystery evolves over time. We chase explanations with urgency, yet sometimes mystery itself becomes the gift. Imagine if every secret were revealed, every uncertainty solved. Would the stars above invite us with the same majesty? Or is part of their power precisely that we cannot completely know them? Lazar's testimony, true or not, becomes part of this larger rhythm, the rhythm of the unanswered. It joins the long lineage of stories humans tell beneath the cosmos, not to resolve, but to feel awe. In that sense, whether whistleblower or storyteller, he serves a role older than science itself. the role of reminding us that curiosity is endless. The desert continues to cradle this curiosity. Coyotes may stir faintly in the distance, their calls echoing like reminders that you are not entirely alone. Yet the greater presence is silence. The silence is not emptiness, but fullness, full of stars, full of distance, full of possibility. Every light above is a sun. Every sun may host planets. Every planet could carry stories we may never hear. Standing at the edge of Area 51 or lying beneath blankets in Rachel, Nevada, the realization is the same. Our place in the universe is small, fragile, precious. And yet, by lifting our eyes into the deep, we participate in something vast. We gaze not outward so much as inward, the Sita, osmos reflecting back our wish to belong to something greater. As the hours deepen closer to dawn, the sky shifts. Stars drift slowly, constellations tilt. The Milky Way slides across its arch like a glowing ribbon. In this gentle motion, time itself feels fluid. You may think about the countless others who have stood beneath similar skies. Ancient desert wanderers, astronomers mapping heavens with pencil and patience, poets scribbling verses of wonder, pilots soaring at the edges of visibility, and the many eyewitnesses who camped beside these same ridges waiting for strange lights. They too tilted their heads upward, hearts caught between skepticism and hope. They too wondered what secret, what truth, might someday fall from the stars into human hands. You are not separate from them. You are part of that same continuity of yearning. In popular imagination, Area 51 has become almost playful. A meme, a punchline, a cartoon backdrop for green figures and cosmic pranks. But the desert itself resists the joke. Its silence reclaims seriousness, wrapping the memes in shadows and reminding you that beneath humor lies mystery. Whatever the base may or may not contain, the sky above it remains larger, older, more incomprehensible than any human vault. The true secret of Area 51, perhaps, is less about what lies inside hangars and more about how secrecy itself heightens the power of the stars. When something is hidden, we dream harder. When something is suggested but never shown, our gaze lingers longer. It is not only Lazar's claims that keep us watching. It is the ancient compulsion to wonder, a compulsion the desert sky amplifies until it fills the whole horizon. Now the desert drapes itself around you like a blanket. Breathing softens. Questions loosen their grip. The shadows of mountains stand as silent guardians, their ridges outlined faintly by starlight. Your body feels smaller, lighter, as if gravity itself has relaxed. In Tihan, these moments, whether UFOs crossed above this valley or never did, something extraordinary remains undeniable. The stars exist, burning with patient brilliance across impossible distances, lighting the sky above you without pause. This truth is not secret, not cloaked by governments, not hidden within bunkers. It is for everyone, always, open without guard or gate. Perhaps that is the deepest comfort. No matter how many fences cut across the desert, the cosmos itself belongs to all who look up. And so, as eyelids grow heavy, let mystery rest where it belongs, not as a puzzle to strain against, but as a companion to carry gently into dreams. Bob Lazar's story, strange and unresolved, becomes one more thread in humanity's fabric of wonder. Area 51, half real and half legend, becomes not a destination, but a symbol. The reminder that there will always be horizons we cannot cross, truths we cannot confirm, secrets just beyond reach. Yet instead of frustration, this can bring peace. Because the not knowing pulls us outward, asking us to imagine, and imagination is the softest, most universal language we speak. In the final quiet of the desert night, let your thoughts rise upward. Picture the Milky Way glowing above like a river of light that has flowed across the sky long before humans took their first steps here. Picture Orion leaning above the ridges, ancient hunter in eternal stance. Picture Cassiopeia resting in her shining throne. Each constellation carries its myths, yet together they form a chorus, a reminder that every culture across time has looked for meaning in the same stars. Now, you are part of that same timeless ritual. You do not need answers. You only need stillness. The Nevada desert hums softly under starlight, its fences silent, its mysteries unsolved. Perhaps hangars hold secrets, or perhaps they do not. Perhaps Bob Lazar told the truth, or perhaps he created a tale that simply touched the right nerves at the right time. What endures beyond such questions is the experience itself, lying here, looking upward, discovering that calm does not require certainty. Calm arrives when we surrender to mystery, allowing stars to be stars and silence to be silence. And so, the story ends not in revelation, but in reflection. The desert slips deeper into quiet. The stars shine on, tireless and endless, and you drift slowly toward the horizon of dreams, not seeking final answers, but finding peace in the wonder that some mysteries may never resolve, and that sometimes the unanswered is exactly what we need.